Vladimir Putin has said Russia's goals in Ukraine remain unchanged as he holds his end-of-year press conference in Moscow. The Russian president is taking questions from the public and journalists in an event that is being broadcast live on Russian state television and is expected to last for hours. Putin, who is running for re-election in March, cancelled last year's show amid Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We'll be analyzing what the Russian president has said so far in just a moment. But first, let's have a listen to some of what he's had to say.
There will be peace when we achieve our goals. Now, let's get back to these goals. They don't change. Let me remind you of what we talked about the denazification of Ukraine, about demilitarization, about its neutral status. We will agree on demilitarization and agree on certain parameters. During the negotiations in Istanbul, we agreed on them, but then they simply threw these agreements into the oven. There are other possibilities, either to reach an agreement or to resolve it by force. This is what we will strive for.
All right, let's bring in DW correspondent Emily Sherwin, who's with us in the studio. Ordinarily, Emily, we'd be speaking to you in Moscow, but Russia banned DW last year. That's why you're here. Emily, the press conference is still ongoing, but so far, what has stood out?
So we just heard that soundbite from Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, and I think that and just foreign policy in general, but particularly Ukraine, has been really Putin's focus in this event. He's always kind of more interested in foreign policy in general, but today it really seems like, you know, that's what he's most interested in, essentially. He said that the goals of the war are unchanged. He talked about the demilitarization of Ukraine and also this kind of propaganda buzzword that we always hear from the Russian side, the denazification of Ukraine. He said those goals have not been fulfilled, so the war will continue. That's one thing that I think is the main takeaway. And the other thing is he talked about the mobilization. He was asked directly whether there will be another mobilization wave in Russia, and he said he didn't answer that question directly, but he did say that for now there's enough volunteers, apparently, who want to fight, as he says. So I think the main takeaway is we won't see much of a change on the front.
So this is also the first time since Russia attacked Ukraine that this press conference has been held. But how does this press conference compare to previous press conferences?
So it's different this year in the sense that it actually is combining two traditional appearances that are part of Putin's yearly calendar. So he always holds this direct line where people can almost phone in and talk about their problems, you know, even in their villages or problems on the national level, and he answers their questions. And then there's another format, which is a press conference, which happens at the end of the year. Both of those were canceled last year among media reports that it was perhaps for lack of clarity on the front in Ukraine, or perhaps because of this unpopular mobilization wave that I already talked about. And this time they're combining both. This is also interesting because it's the first time that Vladimir Putin is appearing publicly since he announced that he will indeed be running for president in March next year. So in a sense, this event is the first campaign event, you could say, as part of his campaign to run for president.
And how do you assess his tone at this campaign event?
So this is setting the tone for his campaign in a sense, but it's a strange one because it does sort of feel like, you know, he does this every year. It almost feels like he's kind of going through the motions in some ways. He always likes talking about foreign policy, as I said, more, but when it comes to domestic policy and the economy, this year he even had, you know, a sheet of paper with numbers on economic growth and so on, whereas usually he kind of has those all memorized and really, you know, is fond of kind of showing off his knowledge of numbers. So, and he said, I've said this a lot. He kind of keeps saying, you know, I've already talked about this. So it does seem like he's kind of there because he has to set the tone for this campaign, but maybe he'd rather be looking into what's happening on the front.
Emily Sherwin, thanks for breaking that down for us.